Overcoming racism amid a global debate over systemic racism, some experts believe the best way forward is through education.
Preparing to safely reopen schools in Borno State, plans to begin setting up COVID-19 testing centers for students, provide hand sanitizers and face masks for staff and student protection is underway.
In Ivory Coast, lifting the 2-month curfew to protect against coronavirus means hope for this restaurant owner.
Hello and welcome to Africa 54. I'm Chamberlain Osoa, Channel Television here in Lagos. I'm joined by Vincent Makori at Voice of America in Washington.
Thanks, I'm Vincent Makori. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, the Voice of America has reduced staffing at VOA headquarters in Washington. So as you see, our broadcast will look a little different today and in the near future. We appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. Let's start off with the latest from Nigeria. Chamberlain Uso in Lagos brings you that story.
The Borno State government is making plans to set up COVID-19 testing centers for students when schools eventually reopen. Tertiary institutions in the state are also working towards making schools safe for students in anticipation of school resumption. The University of Maiduguri is already engaging in mass production of hand sanitizers and face masks. Channels Television's correspondent Blessing Tuno compiled the report.
Polytechnics, colleges of education, state and federal universities, and about 13 tertiary institutions in Borno State have all been shut due to the coronavirus pandemic. With the gradual relaxation of the lockdown, students and lecturers are anticipating the reopening of schools, just as the Borno State government is already making arrangements for testing of returning students, physical spacing, and general sanitation.
What the university needs to do is only to enforce the limits per room among students, and that will help in enforcing the social distancing safety requirement. The other ones are for the university to provide hand sanitizers.
In the University of Maiduguri, the Committee for COVID-19 Intervention has been constituted to drive the institution's response to the pandemic. The committee has so far produced 7,000 face masks and a large volume of hand sanitizers and other required items. The plan is to continue mass production before school reopens.
The major challenge we face and we will continue to face is this social or physical distances because of the nature of our classrooms compared with the student populations. We are thinking of even having morning and afternoon classes so that the students will maintain social or physical distances among themselves.
They believe observing physical distancing protocol can be achieved in classrooms, but the bigger challenge lies within the hostels.
I think it will be very difficult to practice this social distance within the campus only. But I know if it is in class, students will cooperate because 90% of the students, they are from village. And most of our people, because of their thinking, they don't believe in this coronavirus.
In the hostel that we are staying, is 2 jam-packed students. One room, you can see up to maybe 5 to 6 students. So I'm too worried about it when the school resumes.
The state government is also expediting action to complete a new hostel facility at the Ramat Polytechnic with the capacity to ensure adequate spacing. But the ultimate goal is to keep everyone safe and stop the spread of the coronavirus.
To discuss preparations ahead of school reopening, we're joined by Dr. Ibrahim Kida, who is the head of infectious diseases at the University of Maiduguri Teaching Hospital. Welcome to the program, Dr. Kida.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
All right, now the number of COVID-19 cases are rapidly increasing on a daily basis, Well, we're forced to gradually ease the lockdown restrictions, no thanks to the economy also having to save jobs. Now, in consideration of that, do you think the authorities should be reconsidering reopening schools anytime soon?
Thank you very much. So from the way we're looking at this, this COVID-19 pandemic, we still have a long way to go. So I believe we should start considering opening the schools. But we need to do that with following instructions, careful instructions from our health personnel, especially when it comes to the issue of testing our teachers. I believe for us to open these schools, we need to have a mandatory testing of our school teachers, and if possible, even the students. And then there should be provision of face masks, free provision of face masks to our teachers, and possibly even the students. There should be screening facilities like infrared thermometers at the entrance of the schools, the use of hand sanitizers, so all these basic things. In fact, before this opening school, we believe that the teachers should be enlightened by health personnel before we open our schools. But I believe that the way these things is going, we definitely need to start thinking about opening our schools.
Some of the measures you've already highlighted are already operational for the general public. Will that be satisfactory to keep the students safe when schools resume?
Yes, so keeping thank God this COVID-19, it's not, of course it affects the young age, though the severity is not as the way it affects older people, but definitely there should be strict measures that will be there for opening the schools, especially when it comes to screening teachers. Teachers must be screened, and in fact there should be intermittent screening at for teachers and even the students. People with upper respiratory tract infection should be isolated and screened for COVID-19. Of course, there should be face masks at the gate of the face mask distribution at the gate of our schools, and hand sanitizers. So these things should be available before we open. And of course, it's going to take a lot of funding. So, and you know, there are breaks in between in schools. So those breaks, we have to practice social distancing. The students have to be taught how to practice social distancing, and even our teachers, so that we can be able to minimize the spread of the infection, and be able to even identify if there's this spread in our schools.
Oh, one more thing. Now, Borno, like other states in the Northeast and the country, has suffered some setbacks in the healthcare sector. Now, the pandemic puts a lot more pressure on the healthcare system. Would there be recommendations you'd like to give to the government to see what they can do to improve healthcare delivery at this point?
Yes, there are actually. We know we have seen that we are deficient in well-equipped isolation centers. So we want a situation where the government will look at equipping an isolation center and, of course, quarantine facilities. We need those things. Provision of PPE, personal protective equipment. These are key for epidemics like this. And then, most importantly, psychosocial support for people with COVID-19. These are very important things that the government needs to look into to help in the future.
All right, and Dr. Ibrahim Kida, Head of Infectious Diseases at the University of Maiduguri Teaching Hospital. Thank you for talking to us today on Africa 54.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. After the break, fighting racism and police brutality in Senegal, street artists create a fresco for the Black Lives Matter movement. Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. Senegalese artists are taking a stand against racism and police brutality after George Floyd died in police custody in the United States. One street art crew is creating a fresco in Dakar, where Senegalese have held demonstrations this month in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. Estelle Janjo reports from Dakar.
In Dakar, anti-racist protests have found their way through urban culture. A dozen of street artists involved in social justice in Senegal have created a fresco to support the Black Lives Matter movement. This wall took 2 days of work and has been dedicated to African decolonial leaders and figures of black liberation in the United States.
First of all, it marks on consciences, because it is in the urban setting. The people are directly alerted by images. These are images that they are not used to seeing. Here in Senegal, walking past a wall where a Harriet Tubman is represented, it pushes young people to wonder who Harriet Tubman is.
An artistic initiative supported by the youth of Dakar.
Last time we saw a black man killed in the United States of America. Everyone protested against this racist action, which continues to spread. Since grade school, we've been taught equality between men. They come to give us a message of awareness, to show us that they also demonstrate, but in an artistic way.
Last week, a symbolic protest against police brutality against people of color in the United States and France took place in Dakar. The 2016 Voice Africa contestant Aida Sok improvised a song about unity and power. With her friends, she organized the protest in a few days on social media. Fighting racism is something that she can relate as a former US resident.
I think that day when I went there and released it I released it also artistically it was something that I just instantly knew that it matched what I was feeling towards this situation. And it was not just about Black Americans, it was about Black Americans, it was about Black people, it was about Africans, it was about anybody that be going through oppression.
Protesters are planning to increase their numbers through organizing a new protest in July. Estelle Janjo for VOA News, Dakar, Senegal.
Egyptian high school pupils have started their final exams armed with face masks, gloves, and hand sanitizers in efforts to guarantee students' safety. The Health Ministry is placing ambulances and providing a doctor in each school. Any student with a high temperature is meant to have their exams postponed or sit in isolation. But some health experts and parents are worried about the risk of exposure to coronavirus.
Students having their temperatures checked before being allowed into classrooms with well-spaced desks. Nearly 670,000 pupils from government and private schools are due to sit for exams at a time when Egypt has seen an increase of coronavirus cases, with confirmed infections surging to 53,758, including 2,106 deaths.
What if something happens? If something happens, the solution is very simple. The doctor is present. The sick student is dealt with in a very healthy manner. The student might be infected with something, or they might simply be tired and have nothing at all. The doctor that is present is the one who takes this decision. Every examination station has the same preparation.
The head of Egypt's doctors' syndicate had called for the exams to be postponed. Private newspaper Al-Yum Al-Sabah reported, and some parents expressed concern about their children's safety. Honestly, I was worried, and I'm still worried because someone in the class might still have an infection without having informed the administration on the way in. Honesty means that if a student is sick, he should inform the administration so that he can be isolated. Otherwise, he will infect teachers and other students. Authorities say they had taken all necessary precautions, and the Education Ministry offered students an option to postpone to the next academic year without any penalty.
Last year, we used to get searched and then go straight upstairs. That was it. But now, it's something else completely. There's disinfection everywhere because of this virus going around.
End-of-year exams were cancelled for younger pupils who submitted online research papers instead. Egyptian authorities are gradually easing restrictions on movement, but schools and universities have remained shut since March.
I'd like to invite you at this point to visit our website, channelstv.com, for news and other programming around the clock. You can also find us at youtube.com/channelsweb. Still to come, an emoji for World Refugee Day. Partnering with Twitter and the UN Refugee Agency, an Ivorian artist creates a special emoji to mark the day. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. The death of George Floyd while he was in the custody of Minneapolis police is sparking debate about systemic racism and how to combat the problem. Some experts believe the only way to overcome racism is through education. Maxim Moskalkov has our story.
Amid the protests sparked in the U.S. by the death of George Floyd, the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. has launched an educational web portal called Talking About Race. The project tells the viewers about racism and racial dynamics in the U.S. society.
Embedded in the portal is a brief history of racism, particularly in the U.S. context. We really want to help individuals and communities really think about their racialized identities.
The web portal is the result of many years of work of the museum's employees and incorporates in-depth research in the spheres of history, science, and psychology.
Silence is dangerous, and silence sends a message. And so when race is not being discussed at all, whether it's to gloss over it, to pretend it doesn't exist, to say that we're colorblind, any of those versions of silence, it cuts off the conversation. It does not allow us to see what's happening in our world. It doesn't allow us to know how to process or deal with it. It doesn't allow us to connect across lines of difference or even within groups of affinity.
The materials the project uses don't just provide factual information, but also offer solutions in the racial problem that can be seen in almost all spheres of American life, from economy and politics to culture and education.
There's often a single narrative that has been told throughout a student's life within the school system, and that narrative is most often through the white male perspective. And so what we advocate for is for multiple perspectives. African American history is American history. This is the story of the United States.
However, Gary Orfield, professor and co-director of the Civil Rights Project at UCLA, says the problem lies not just in the substance of the U.S. education, but in its structure as well. In 2006, the Civil Rights Project that Orfield started published a report which found that the level of segregation in the U.S. education system hasn't improved that much compared to the late 1960s. He adds the situation has become even graver since the report came out 14 years ago.
Basically, we have race and class problems. Our typical student of color in the United States, Black and Latino students, Native American students, are in a school that's overwhelmingly poor, that has less experienced teachers, that has a more limited curriculum, has a much less competitive peer group, much less powerful parents.
Orfield believes segregation is forwarded by the popularization of the so-called charter schools, private institutions that are not required like public schools to accept any students regardless of race. On top of that, they are not even required to teach civil law classes.
In the 1960s and early 70s, we had a whole series of policies to integrate our schools and to upgrade them, both with additional financial resources and with bringing down the barriers to allow the students of color into the better schools in our society. And what's happened is that we have largely abandoned that effort as the Supreme Court has become more conservative and school districts were allowed to dissolve their desegregation plan.
Orfield adds it's necessary to go back to the methods of desegregation of schools that were widely used during the time of civil rights movements in the country and let parents choose a school for their children. Maxim Moskalkov for VOA News, Washington.
An Ivorian artist has created a special emoji to mark this year's World Refugee Day. The artist partnered with Twitter and the UN Refugee Agency to launch the emoji, which has two hands linked together in the shape of a heart, symbolizing solidarity and diversity. Have a look.
22-year-old Ivorian artist Gwebe Opleru is sending a powerful message with a special 2020 World Refugee Day emoji created to mark this year's World Refugee Day. Marked on 20th June each year, the day recognizes the courage and resilience of the millions of people forced to flee their homes due to war or persecution. The artist made headlines in 2019 after creating 365 emojis, one for each day of the year, inspired by African culture. Now he's created one for refugees.
I hope this emoji will inspire people to show more solidarity and accept each other's differences.
This year's World Refugee Day comes at a time of increased forced displacement and against the backdrop of dramatic social change.
This emoji is based on 3 key UNHCR values: diversity, acceptance, and solidarity. To represent that, I thought of putting together 2 hands of different colors that make the shape of the heart.
The emoji comes with the hashtag World Refugee Day in several languages and aims to draw attention to the plight of refugees and displaced people.
Working with UNHCR on this project gave me the chance to better understand the situation of refugees and displaced people, and now I feel way more concerned about the issue.
Opleru was named in Forbes' Africa 30 Under 30 list of young men and women forging the continent's future with creative and innovative ideas in the fields of business, art, technology, and sports. The artist says he would like to recreate his Ivorian emojis in 3D. If everything goes well, he plans to travel to Kenya, Rwanda, and South Africa to discover other cultures and create emojis for them.
Today, in our series COVID-19 Diaries from Ivory Coast, we take you to Abidjan, where the measures to slow the coronavirus outbreak are being reduced, the 2-month curfew has been lifted, and the traditional open-air restaurants called Moki have been allowed to reopen. Akabla Beayude is a restaurant owner whose business has been negatively affected by the crisis. Images are by IDC.
The damage is tremendous, and it has a domino effect. You see, I am a restaurant owner. I employ people, and these people rely on the income that comes from my restaurant. So suddenly it all stopped. Everything related to it too. The purchases, the contacts, the deliveries. It's like a chain. It all goes down too. It also has an impact there, so the damage is really huge. I can say without exaggerating that it created a sense of misery. We have not received any help from the government. I wonder if we ever will. During their decision-making, they did not take us into consideration. If they want to help, they need to be organized. And we weren't even considered, although we pay our taxes. On what basis will they compensate or help? So no, I have not been compensated, and I will not be compensated. In the transportation sector, contamination happens very, very, very fast. They let them work while taking precautionary measures. But they did not do so for catering. Catering is necessary. They could have organized us as well. asked us, for example, to distance clients a meter apart. We also shouldn't limit ourselves to ways to stop the pandemic. What about afterward? If I open tomorrow, I will insist that my clients wash their hands when they enter and when they leave the restaurant. So that's how the pandemic affected us. The future rests in God's grace.
And that's our show for today. You can find all the continent's top news and world news online at voaafrica.com. Check it out. I'm Vincent Makori in Washington. Channels Television has our last word from Lagos.
Thanks, Vincent. We look forward to bringing you another show next week. Remember, channelstv.com is your source for news and other programming. I'm Chamberlain Uso. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.